Established in April 2021, Upland Development United is the oldest and most exclusive and transparent no development collaborative in the Upland Metaverse. Contact Morecheese at 68 for more information. Warning! This podcast is produced by Metaverse Ventures Entertainment and contains unsolicited and heavily biased opinions which are solely the views of the individuals involved. It does not include investment advice of any kind, and you are responsible for undertaking your own financial, including tax liability research relevant to your own individual circumstances.
Now, normally this is where we talk about all the Upland news, what has been happening in Upland, but what hasn't been happening in Upland. But we kind of covered that already, and it's given us heaps and heaps of time left in the show to touch on something very, very cool that's all come about in the last week and a half or something like that for MV Motors. Now, how many bloody iterations of the name have we had? It was Meta Motors, then it was M Motors, and now it's MV Motors. What's that all about? Anybody know? Yeah. Lawyers lawyering, is it?
Maybe.
So,
Lawyer's gonna lawyer.
Yeah, so special spotlight on what is now called MV Motors. Just first up, I just want to say, I mean, we're in a bit of a DAC love fest in this show. I don't know what's going on, but when DAC first came out with the idea of the URL server, I think it was in DM. I was like, mate, you're getting a bit ahead of yourself here. This is all speculation, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of, because I have a good relationship with DAC, I kind of poo-pooed on the idea, but fair credit to him. Yeah, he's just gone gangbusters as far as forward thinking and planning ahead, and being super proactive in getting things set up and running. I don't know, did you want to speak to that, Dak? And like you dropped some information earlier on about a new system that's happening. Did you want to outline all of that now and how you went about with securing, was it Jeremy? Was that it from the team?
Yeah, Jeremy, the head of product for racing.
So give us the lowdown, mate.
Sure. Well, you're right. Ben, you were not the only one to come to me when I invited people. Originally, the idea came up. Believe it or not, Malice Guy was actually kind of the impetus for creating URL. And I don't think many people know this story, but I was talking to her about just construction and UCC and, you know, how we might get into manufacturing vehicles and everything. And she got very excited. And she was telling me about how she's really kind of set up, you know, and that she really wants to invest in racing and everything, and that, you know, how much she had put aside for it and all that. And I was like, holy cow, people are real serious about racing. And then, you know, when I was in the Upland Cafe, I was talking to like different folks like Elijah from the Real LA Node. And I was talking to JR Wheels, who wanted to do something with French Road in Detroit. And I started to kind of say, okay, it's either I move now or I watch other people do it for me. And, you know, I like to always be moving forward instead of chasing. And so I decided, let's just start it, even if it's early. There's enough information that we can do some speculation around how it's going to work. We can put together some very basic kind of business concepts around it. In real world, that's kind of what I do. You know, I'm a sales guy. I'm a products person where I package products and offerings. I create playbooks for sales and so forth. And so I decided, you know, let's kind of take a look at what could the future of racing be. And that's where kind of the difference between speculation and guessing, right? You take the futurist and did I break up? Okay, you take the future and then you kind of work backwards and you put all the steps in between. So so that's how URL kind of came into being. One, I've reached out to a lot of different people trying to get the server going and so forth. We had some early adopters who were like, I call them bleeding edge entrepreneurs. They saw the business models and they were ready to just jump in and go for it, whether they were right or wrong. And it's kind of like, Ben, I think of your story with Meta Ventures, you know, back when it was beta business or whatever it was back in the day, and you took a chance and it could bite, you know, it could work out or it can bite you in the butt kind of thing. And so we kind of went forward. As part of reaching out to different folks, I reached out to SecNet. And some of the folks might know MMSecNet as kind of like he's a community developer manager. So he's the one that's put together the Upland Development Network, and kind of he's promoting the whole hackathon that they're doing and everything. And so I had been talking to him about what we were doing with UCC and getting into the developer network and so forth. And I sent him information about URL. And he brings in Jeremy into a chat with me. He's like, hey, Dak, I want to introduce you to Jeremy. He's head of racing. And I was like, oh. And I'm like, hi, Jeremy. Would you want to talk? Would you want to join URL? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. And for those that were on the town hall meeting with Jeremy, he is very approachable. He's a really nice guy. He's really smart. He really does know what he's doing. And he's a really good product manager. He wanted to get the voice of the customer. It's something that's really important, and being able to understand and guide the roadmap of any product offering. And so one of the benefits that I kind of promoted to Jeremy about doing the session in URL versus anywhere else was that these were early adopters who were investing and were entrepreneurs in this model, in this new play to earn model. And they were content creators, which Upland keeps talking about wanting and so forth, right? And so Jeremy just kind of started as a perfect fit for him to understand what the market is expecting from Upland in terms of racing, to kind of provide some information versus speculation, because people were coming up with all kinds of crazy ideas, and eventually that would also create problems for Upland. And he just was, happy to kind of engage, and that's how he ended up coming onto the show. It was just introductions and networking.
That's very cool. Now I'll just interject to say too, the key phrase for the big 1 million UpX wheel is Jeremy spoke in class today. Jeremy spoke in class today. So stick that in your brain bank. Yeah, and yeah, as I just said in chat, feel free if you have any information to add or questions for Dak about what went down, jump on in and ask. So I don't know probably a lot of the information that you got in there, I assume, Dak, was stuff that you had already kind of speculated or were thinking about. Was there anything in that chat that kind of blew you away?
Yeah, and one of the things I've said very often is I did not speak to Jeremy about any functionality prior to the town hall. Everything was new to me, as it was to everyone else, which was great because it was nice to get surprised. There were a couple of big things. One, I was blown away when he said registration for vehicle purchases is going to be June 8th, and you'll be able to buy June 9th during Genesis week. I think everyone was like, what? So soon? I don't think anyone expected cars in Genesis. I think they were thinking September, October kind of time frame. Then he said, not only will you be able to buy the car, you'll be able to get in it and race it. Wow. And I was like, wait, they already have the functionality that far developed. Now, true, you can't race it against other players. You can't really do much else. And it's a pre-created Upland track with perfect weather and all that. And so it's very vanilla. But just the idea that you can pick a BE, pick an NFT, go into the track and race is pretty amazing in terms of the implications of what that means for the metaverse.
Just going back to the sale, like we know we have to register. Is this going to play out like the Spark sale, where you're going to be put in a queue and you're going to have to sit there sweating, watching the numbers slowly disappear? Or how do you think that's going to play out?
So one of the things that he mentioned during the town hall was that MV Motors will be producing vehicles, and it does take Spark to produce the vehicles, and they'll be producing the vehicles. And what's kind of cool is it sounds like they're going to be actually putting them on the lot across the street from MV Motors. So I think a lot of people are going to be visiting Santa Clara and kind of doing a drive-by to look at the cars in the lot kind of thing, right? And so there's going to be a certain number of vehicles that are going to be produced, and those are the ones that are going to be sold. And so the expectation is that demand for cars is going to be much greater than the production that they're able to roll out off the assembly line before sale. Yep. So yes, it does seem like people will be put into a raffle. You'll be given a random number, and then hopefully you get a chance to buy a car.
So we know that Spark's going to essentially construct the vehicles. is this our Spark? We're going to be constructing them with our Spark?
There is no definition of that. I do believe
Yeah.
MV Motors has their own Spark pool. I think someone said they have 65 Spark, but I'm not sure about that number.
Yeah, I'm not kind of clear on, are we buying a finished product that's ready to go, or are we buying a shell that we then have to build with Spark?
No, you're buying a car, and
Finished,
they're going to be rolling out 6 different models, from your sedan, your coupe, to your semi truck.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, because I was envisioning a situation where somebody might want to buy whatever the best car is, and they register for it, but they didn't have the Spark to actually produce it. But that seems like
No. This is you're buying an NFT.
Yep.
So think of it like the ornaments or anything like that, where it's already produced and you buy it, it gets added to your wallet, and now you have it available.
It's good to go. And there's no clues given in regards to pricing. Do you have any intuitions yourself about that?
So no clues in terms of pricing. It does seem like, and one of the things that's made very clear is that everything is subject to change.
Yeah.
Right. And so not putting anyone on the spot and saying, you said it was going to be this, and this, right? So none of that. But we do know that it's going to be an UPEX purchase. So that's great. So you don't have to worry about putting USD in to buy cars and so forth. There is no information on pricing at this point. Jeremy would not provide that at that point. He just couldn't give it to us. And we were like, okay, that's fine. But speculation in the market and URL, and talking to like some of the different folks who are looking to buy race cars and semi trucks and so forth, we believe that I've seen a semi truck probably between 250,000 and 500,000 UPEX. And so a sedan might be something like 30,000 UPEX. Something like that, like your
cheap.
local commuter.
That's cheap. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we don't
cheap.
think that, well, because think about, the idea is people, for the most part, are going to need some sort of transportation model. So your day-to-day commuter is going to have to be available and readily accessible to other people. I don't know if they're going, they did mention, I believe he mentioned that there would be other types of transportation also. So like motorcycles or something like that. So we don't know what the 6 vehicles are going to be. And that's why I don't say cars, I say vehicles, because we don't know what all 6 different models are going to be yet.
Yeah, and your Prince has just said in the chat, and I just had that thought too, just before I read your comment, mate. He said it sounds cheap, but relative to properties, perhaps expensive. I think it's actually pretty close. Like, if you think of an entry-level property in Upland is what, 3 to 5K? 3 to 5K, 3 to 5,000 UPEX. So if you're thinking, oh no, that doesn't work out at all, really. That's the opposite of what I was thinking. Yeah. So if a house
actually
costs you
pretty expensive.
If a house costs you 5,000, but your car costs you 50,000, that's a bit
right.
weird.
It is expensive, and so when you think of it in terms of like, people are just used to the idea of paying 200,000. You see properties going up for sale for 2 million UPEX and so forth, and you're like, oh, 30,000 is nothing. But for new players, for uplanders who are getting in and they're still trying to get to that 100,000 mark and everything, 30,000 is a lot. That's 30% of their net worth.
Yeah. For me personally, I'm trying to save up some additional funds. I'd like to get to 1.5 million there, and I'm hoping that from that budget I can pick up a truck and a race car. The race car, for obvious reasons, I want to race and do all that stuff, but the truck as a bit of a hedge for what's to come with, transportation of decor items and that. Do you want to speak to that process as we know?
Yeah, so Jeremy did mention that transportation will be, it's not in the initial release or anything like that. Remember this, they're releasing minimum viable product for Genesis week, right? And so it's going to be very vanilla, not a lot of different functionality, but they're going to start rolling out more and more functionality throughout the year. And transportation is going to be a thing. Because there is going to be an odometer on your car. And so there's going to be wear and tear. And so let's say your 750,000 UPEX racer is not the one you want to just drive from one city to another city. So you're going to want to transport your racer from one city to another city in the semi trucks. And yes, you will be able to do that. And if you can transport the NFT that is a vehicle, then chances are you will also be able to transport the NFT that is outdoor decor or, something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I know back in the day when my race car, as much as I would have loved to drive that down the street, you can't drive race cars down the street. You're going to get in big trouble. So, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
I think Upland might be a little more laxed.
Yeah, but it makes sense. I mean, imagine you signed up for a race and you were going to transport yourself there, but then, we know that damage is going to be a thing. We know that wear and tear is going to be a thing eventually. You get to the track and your car's 3/4 dead and you got to go back and get it fixed. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. If you're going to be serious about racing, you might want to start thinking about picking yourself up a truck or something as well, if it's within your means. But then there's going to be other services like what you're suggesting.
Yeah, and your print kind of mentioned that it's a metaverse and we should do away with the pain points. But one of the things that I think people are very excited about is the idea of operational logistics and all of the business models that end up coming and becoming available because of these things. So now transportation becomes a business model. The trims and being able to set up a car with different trims becomes a business model. Advertising, sponsoring, vendors, promoters, Radish Head, YK 2012, and a couple of others are promoters in URL because that they can talk about it, and so they have the opportunities to do things like that. So there's a lot of niche markets that you can get into because of the fact that you have some of these real world issues that have to be mitigated inside the metaverse.
Absolutely. Now, I can speak as far as the outdoor decor side of things in transport goes, because this has been a conversation, or it's been part of the conversation from way back when. So we're fairly certain, as it's been communicated to us, that again, at first release, outdoor decor is going to be, you buy the piece, it's going to be in your inventory, you can just plonk it down and move it around wherever on your property. But that's going to eventually change where you may need to come to San Francisco to buy one of my outdoor decor pieces that are going to be on display on one of my properties, which is why all of this stuff with nodes and everything started off, because I wanted as many properties as I could to display inventory. Now, you might pick it up off the showroom or whatever, but eventually that outdoor decor piece is going to have to be transported to your city of choice or your area. So yeah, there's a lot of peripheral businesses that are going to be associated with all this.
Yeah, and I think that is one of the things that's really important. Upland, from when I first got into it, they've always talked about having a community-led economic model instead of being funded by Upland, right? So right now, most of the economic engine of Upland is through the monthly earnings of properties or the flipping of properties. So it's very limited in its functionality in terms of creating a true macroeconomic model. By being able to kind of create these functional elements that then have kind of subsidiary or connected functionality, you really do start creating niche markets, and those niche markets start, moving UPEX around and bringing more UPEX into Upland. I mean, UCC, we created a niche market for construction, and, through some of our services, we did 1.7 million in gas fees for a service or offering that was not even sold in Upland. So, we generated 1.7 million in gas fees, UPEX, that went into the community pool for a product or offering or a service that's not even inside of Upland.
Yeah.
And that's what, doing a true community driven economic model can do, is you can actually bring in UPEX from the outside that's not within the game and create more dynamic models that way.
Maybe that's a good segue over to racing. Like I know within Midtown Terrace, we're going to offer we will have in-house races where it's UDU team members only, but we will be inviting, members of the public to join in for some big events. And, we are always interested about going big. We're not shy to give away prizes and that sort of thing. As a classic example with the 1 million that we're willing to give away here. Maybe I'll bring that up, and that can help as a kind of talking point for you to speak about what you envision as far as racing and that goes. Now, I put this tweet out, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago about, have you got that up there? So this is the MTU 100, and I think Dak and Cheese are both giggling because they know what we call it on the back end. But yeah, so this is a real world map of Midtown Terrace, and we've put the track in there, which we're going to refer to as the MTU 100. So it's going to be, I think it's about a 3-kilometer track, which is, I don't know, 1.8 miles, that says. So I'm all about open wheel races, and Formula One races usually go for a certain amount of time or a certain amount of distance. So I did the math on that, and it works out to about 100 laps around here. So we'll see. We may do shorter sprint races and whatnot, but that'll be our big. That's kind of like going to be our Indy 500 sort of thing. That's going to be the showcase event. Unfortunately, because the way the road system works out, there was no option to extend over into the residential area to the right of Midtown Terrace. But I guess that makes sense. You don't want too many race cars burning around in the residential area. So yeah, it's kind of restricted to this. And as part of it, we do have a straightaway where we may run drag races and whatnot. So I don't know, Dak, can you use this as an example to speak about what you're envisioning or what you're seeing with other teams as they're gearing up for racing?
Yeah, so one of the things that happened with more and more exposure coming to URL, we've been getting a flood of individuals, and a lot of people like to design racetracks, but actually managing and running a racetrack is very different from just designing a racetrack. So we've put the submissions for racetracks on hold as we kind of come up with some regulations and kind of how to create a track that's viable and will survive kind of thing, right? A couple of things that we, being player created racetracks will not be a thing for some time, right? So we know that it's not going to be something that we're going to start doing in June. We're hoping that we can start having player created tracks sometime in, let's say, October, November, December. If we can get it started this year, that would be amazing. With what I'll say. The way that Jeremy kind of talked about it, one of the things that he kind of mentioned that I thought was kind of cool is, yes, players will be able to create overlays. An overlay is going to be the racetrack that then is sucked into Unity, and because all of the actual racing and the presentation of the race is going to be on the Unity platform. And what we are going to end up doing is, so if you take your kind of track that you have, all of the properties that are right on the track, pretty much what you would have to do is select all of the properties as part of creating this overlay concept, and they become kind of what we're dubbing a race node. That race node is then submitted as the track overlay into Unity. And what's cool about it is that you can make the track overlay private, you can make it public, you can have it repeatable, you can do one-offs for like the street racing kind of model, just pick a street, say let's go, and drop it into Unity, right? So people can do quick races that they want, but for individuals who are doing motorsports and like URL, where we want tracks that we're going to be running lots of different races through and so forth, we want them to be permanent, we want them to be public, and we want to be able to kind of advertise them and so forth. And so, yeah, so being able to take a race like this, all of the properties that are right on the track, selecting those as part of the race node, and then using that to create the overlay, that's what you're going to see in Unity. When they show the video of you driving, of them driving down the street in San Francisco, and you see all of the buildings and everything, that's why they need the property selected, so that they then know what is going to be the Upland equivalent of that racetrack in Unity.
So is that, hopefully that's going to be like some kind of functionality where it's just you click on it to highlight the properties. If it's a manual patch in process, that's going to be a major pain in the butt.
And I'll tell you right now, there'll be people who will do it because they really want it that bad.
Yeah. Well,
But
I know
yeah,
just
how
putting
they're
this
going.
map together was a pain.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be really kind of cool. Jeremy didn't really have a sense of how it was going to be done. He just kind of said that it could be something like this, with the idea of selecting the properties and so forth. Maybe there'll be a secondary tool that they develop for being able to trace the track in Upland, and then that creates it or something. I don't know what they're going to do, and Jeremy wasn't really exactly sure because, as I said, the player tracks are not going to be what's available in the near future.
And it's going to be clunky, it's going to be glitchy, it's going to be buggy, it's going to be simple, but that's all part of the process. The important thing is that people see where this is headed.
Correct. And it is definite, and you know, a lot of the speculation that we were doing in URL, Jeremy was able to confirm that there is going to be some variation of what we were speculating, which got a lot of the race commissioners and a lot of the folks who were in URL very excited.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I've been flapping on long enough. Does anybody have some questions for Dak about MV Motors?
Well, you had mentioned there were like to let new people in who want to run a track, that there are going to be some parameters or like what can you like name a few of the more important ones?
Yeah, because talk is cheap.
Exactly. And you know, like I said, everyone wants to go and design a track, and it's a lot of fun and everything, but to actually run a racing business, you do need a lot of you do need to have a lot of elements that are viable and so forth. And so I have a ranking board. The ranking board is a group of individuals who were early adopters of URL, who have their own kind of races or racing teams, and the league commissioners that are involved. And we started talking through some of the regulations that we would need, just based on what we've been prepping ourselves for a viable track, right? And so a couple of things that you need is you need to be able to have a track that's laid out and have a decent group of ownership in that track, right? So you need, you know, you can't just say that I have one property on this street and I'm claiming this whole city kind of thing, because there's no commitment from everyone else on that track. And also there's just not enough. Then how are you going to make that business viable with your organizing 12 to 18 drivers, doing multiple races during a month or a season? How are you going to do sponsorships and ads? How are you going to do price purses? How are you going to do entry fees? How are you going to do qualifiers? And so there's a lot of those elements that kind of need to be there. The other part of it is that we do want it to be very community driven. And so we do want to see that people are kind of engaged in the track. And a great indicator of that engagement is like what we have in French Road with JR Wheels and what he's been able to do. He's done a lot of giveaways. He's gotten a lot of people engaged. French Road was pretty much unminted when he started. It's now minted out, and he had like 12 buildings done in like 2 or 3 weeks. I mean, people jumped on it and they built up really fast, and there was a lot of excitement around getting that done. And so we want to see some structures on the properties. We want to see that the properties, you know, are engaged, because we might be able to use them for spectators in the future, right? One of the things that Jeremy talked about was outdoor decor and being able to put that on a property. So like a bleacher, or maybe a rocking chair, or whatever it is, right? But being able to do something where you can have spectators sitting on properties viewing, and you would need structures. You also will need structures or something for the transportation. We talked about the logistics, right? So do you have a pit row? Do you have transportation parking? Do you have racer hoteling, right? Do you have apartments or town halls or places for your racers to stay during race week or whatever it is, right? And so there's a lot of actual elements and logistics that you need to think about when you say, I want to build this racetrack.
That's so exciting, man. Just listening to everything, it gets me going a bit. And I remember you came to me months back and we're like, geez, you want to do this? See, now the first thing that goes through my head is, how much work will this be? How much time will I have to spend on it? And can I do it? And a lot of people just be like, oh, racing, I'm in, and I was just like, I know Dak is very, he wants to get things done. He'll get them done. And do I have that much time for him? And at the time I didn't, because like my Bronx Day was just starting. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do this now. So I said, let me wait until I get things established in Bronxdale and whatnot. So I love that you are outlining stuff that needs to be considered before people get into this, because like you said, you can't just say, I have one property, let's race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any kind of vetting you can do is, of course, beneficial for you guys setting it all up, but it's also beneficial to give people a bit of a gentle reality check as well, because it's very easy to come up with ideas, but you cannot underestimate the time that it takes to do all these things.
And same thing for racing teams, right? Yep. We did some back of the napkin math on how much would it cost a racing team to sponsor one driver for one season. It was about 650,000 UPICs. So if you think about a team that has 10 drivers, if they're laying out all the costs, that's 6.5 million UPICs.
Yep.
That's not cheap.
Well, it's kind of crazy how, like some of the things you mentioned then, it's kind of crazy how micro level you can go with it all. Like you can take the macro view, which is what we're going to get initially, kind of just almost bare bones Mario Kart style racing. But yeah, you could go super micro, into all the logistics and whatnot. And the other thing that's going to be very, very interesting to see is how the team's going to manage the allocation and setup of tracks. Like, how is the team going to police and manage? Like, if can any knucklehead come along and build a track in Portage Park or out of Sunset or somewhere? Or how they're going to police that's going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, and I think what's great is Elijah. He's been doing a lot of work with the Real Note LA and his Ithaca run. I think that folks should really kind of look at what he's done and how he's put it all together. JR Wheels and what he's done with French Road is pretty amazing. And so I think that there are good examples of how people are thinking big. And if you're building a racetrack, it's big, right? But what's amazing is that there's also lots of opportunities for people who don't have the time, don't have the UPICs bankroll and so forth to get in, right? They can petition to be a driver. They can look to create their own garage functionality or something like that, right? One little garage doing, custom paint jobs for vehicles could be a great entry point. And, you build that big enough and you set one garage up in every city. Now you've become one of the biggest, car designers in Upland kind of thing, right? So there's ways that you can start small and build up into something huge.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I know I've been kind of sleeping on it as well, but you've kind of lit a fire under me and I'm going to have to get my finger out. And I've got a lot of ideas, but I need to get them out and established, that sort of thing. So, all right, unless anybody else has something to chime in or ask Dak, we might wrap that up there. I'll give the last word to anybody. Otherwise, over to you, Dak, for a last wrap up. Going once, going twice. All right, wrap us up, Dak. Where can people find out more or get in touch?
Upland Racing League on Discord. We're happy to have you join, and little by little, more and more information is coming out. We will have a town hall on Thursday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern to talk a little bit more about tracks, racing teams, and the business of URL.
Perfect. All righty. Thank you very much for jumping in and giving us the lowdown on what's happening and what's to come.
Thank you for having me.